Hello, and welcome to the Educational Fix podcast. I'm Lyle. Today's educational fix is positive narration. So, positive narration is the act of narrating or describing the behaviors and things that are happening in the classroom. It is a behavior management strategy, and it's very, very good for helping students see the behaviors that they are doing or should be doing. And it's also a strategy that can be used for academics as well. It can help point out key academic behaviors, not just student attentiveness behaviors, but academic behaviors like see the thing doing this, now it's doing that, now it's doing that. That's a part of how this activity is done. This is how the demonstration is done correctly. And positive narration is very, very important if you want your student to have a good understanding of what they should be doing, but also providing that in a positive manner. So the question is, what problem does positive narration solve? Oftentimes, positive narration will solve the issue of inconsistent behavior expectations. So when you are providing positive narration, it clarifies what those expectations need to be. So a lot of times teachers will say, they're not doing the thing that I want them to do. Probably because you're not as explicit as you need to be about what the expectation is. Sometimes it could be a math activity and you want the students to count, but they're just looking at the whatever they need to count and just counting them, but you actually wanted them to count and touch. And so saying count, no count is not a consistent behavior expectations. You can say, Susie is counting and touching each bear. Billy is counting and dragging his finger across each line. Susan or Larry is touching each place value as he says the number. That is providing explicit instruction, and a lot of times when you narrate, it can help clarify, not just for the students, but for you, exactly what you want to see. And so by saying, hey, I noticed that TJ is doing this, this, and this, that's excellent. That's a good way to do it. And that helps clarify those expectations. Also solves the problem of negative correction. So a lot of teachers get in the habit of telling students no a lot and then berating them. Some teachers even berate students. Please do not berate your students. That's very inappropriate. What I would do is provide positive narration. You don't have to keep telling students no. No, do this. No, do that. I want you to sit. No, I don't stand up. I need you to sit. A lot of times they don't even say what the directive is. Sometimes they'll just say, no, don't stand, don't stand, don't stand, don't run, don't run. Positive narration tells the student what they should be thinking about. It's the same type of issue as the pink elephant syndrome. If you tell somebody not to think about elephants or pink elephants, the first thing they're going to think about is elephants. So when you redirect a student and you say, don't run, don't play like this, don't hit, don't kick, they're going to be thinking about hitting and kicking and running the whole time. Instead of saying, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see that, I'd like to see that. George is doing that. Sasha is doing this. That's great. Thank you for walking, Hakeem. Thank you for keeping your hands to yourself, Bobby. Because you're positively narrating, and using the student's name is actually very helpful in the strategy as well, you're going to allow them to see positive directives of what they should be doing rather than what they should not be doing, so that your class is more happy, but also they know what to do. Telling them not to do things it kind of bites a lot of teachers in the butt because they think they're being tough on crime, but they're really just being unclear. It also helps students to regulate their own behavior. When you want your students to be independent, That means they're working on their own, they're following directions on their own, they're not asking questions that are unnecessary, that aren't related to new information. They're doing things according to the routine that you've put into place. Having positive narration helps a lot with that, because by saying, hey, Jessica, I like how you're sitting and you're using your pencil correctly and your desk is neat, will cue other students to do the same type of behavior, or at least to check to make sure that they're doing it, even if they decide not to do it. That positive narration is very, very important. And a lot of times that positive narration might make them think, oh, if they're saying something good to that student, I'm going to want them to say, or the teacher to say the same thing for me, because that positive narration can be a type of reward for some students. So it really helps with a lot of that behavior issue, creating that positive environment, making sure that it de-escalates situations and problem behaviors instead of encouraging more problem behaviors or making students feel shameful because you're constantly berating them or redirecting them with negativity. It makes everybody feel positive. It diffuses situations. It helps them understand what those explicit expectations are. So the question is, how do you implement positive narration? Well, here's how you do it. Like I've alluded to, the first thing you want to do is identify a behavior. It's usually going to be a behavior that you want your students to do. If you want them to have a notebook on their desk, you can start thanking students who have notebooks. This student has their notebook out. Oh, that student has their notebook out. Excellent job. This student's pencil is right where it needs to be. This student is writing a lot of sentences right now. That's exactly what we should be seeing. And that's how you narrate those positive behaviors. That's how you get students to do what you need them to do, for them to understand the expectations that you want. You can do this in a number of different ways. You can tell the student directly what you want them to do. You can say this student is doing, or you could do it on a whole group level. Sometimes positive narration is just about the traits that you want them to exhibit. So this student is being really helpful to their friends. This student is cooperating very nicely. This student is following the procedures perfectly and being really attentive. Using those character traits is also really positive and helpful way to help students know what they're doing. Now, there is a misconception that this is a practice that cannot be used with high school. That is not true. I've used this with high school students. I've used it with high school students that are not into the whole professional teaching, if we can say it that way. I've used it with a lot of different types of students, and the reality is it does work with high school. What you have to do, especially with high school and middle school, is you have to stop doing the individual narration that you're doing with perhaps a student on the elementary level, saying, Lydia is doing excellent. She has her pencil out and her eyes are on me. Instead of doing that, the way that you narrate is just saying, the whole class is doing wonderful. The whole class is really on track. Or if you want to individualize it, you can say, I see some students doing this. You can do something general and saying, some students on this side of the room is really getting it together. The back of the room seems to have it. That positive narration is still important on a high school level. In fact, you can go even deeper and do it on a more individual level. And this is something I learned from another teacher. She positively narrates, like I mentioned before, the student's behavior characteristics. So instead of doing something as specific as saying this student has their attention on the paper and they're filling out their work and they're completing each problem, that's what we want them to do if we're being very literal. But when we're talking about older students, they benefit more from the positive behaviors, perhaps, that they're exhibiting that relate to the behaviors that you want to see. So going to the student and saying, Lonnie is really resilient right now because I saw you, Lonnie, take a problem, not know the answer, and you looked up the solution. And that is phenomenal. And we need to see that more. So now you've tied Lonnie's behavior not just to what they're doing verbatim or physically with their body, but to the character trait. They're being resilient. You can also say that they're being thoughtful. You can say that they're being cooperative. They're being analytical. You can use all of these words to help narrate the positive behaviors that you want to see in the classroom in a way that you can shout them out in the middle of the classroom without coming off as insulting or condescending to the students because of their age. And that's how you use positive narration. You tell the students what you like that they're doing. It could be whole group, it could be individual, it could be specific behaviors, it could be character traits, but you can use it in any classroom. It's a very, very useful tool to help clarify your expectations, your needs, and help create a positive environment and mitigate any issues that you may be experiencing from your students. Thank you for joining the Educational Fix podcast. I hope that you use this fix today in your classroom. If you're interested, please check out my book, So Thriving Special Education. Thanks for listening. See you soon.